For over 2 decades, Scott Johnson dedicated himself to shaping young minds as a math teacher, earning multiple Math Teacher of the Year honors and a national board certification. He still volunteers at a local elementary school, mentoring and tutoring students in his retirement, but his influence extended far beyond the classroom. He also coached football at Starmount High School in Boonville, North Carolina for 20 years, as an assistant coach from 1997 to 2004, winning a state championship in 1998, then as a head coach from 2005 to 2017. During his tenure as the head coach, his teams won their conference championship 6 times. They won 10 or more games 7 seasons in a row, completed a streak of 38 consecutive conference wins in a row, and appeared in 2 Final Fours, first in the 2A classification in 2008 and the 1A classification in 2014. Coach Johnson also initiated weekly themed character education lessons for his players. These had a massive impact on me as a young man. Johnson's commitment to character and leadership is evident in everything he does, whether it was mentoring student athletes, leading the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for 20 years, or helping establish the Starmount High School Hall of Fame itself. His passion for education, faith, and sports has left a lasting mark on his community and the lives of countless students and athletes. Scott Johnson's story is one of dedication, leadership, and impact. And today, we get to hear it firsthand. Welcome to Beyond the Playbook, Coach.
Thank you.
All right, today we want to dive into what made Coach Johnson successful, explore some of the difficulties he may have had, and as well as listening on any advice he may have for new and upcoming and continuing coaches.
Yeah, so number one, Coach, thank you for coming on. We're going to start off today with this first question. Can you share a little about your background and, what led you to become a coach? What was growing up like? You're you grew up locally in Allegheny and Sparta, if I recall.
Yes, sir. I grew up in Allegheny County. Went to a little elementary school, Lake Creek Elementary, that was a K-8 school. At that school, I had the opportunity to have 3 gentlemen. When you're coming through elementary school, you don't have a lot of male teachers. But 3 gentlemen in my 6th grade year that had a huge impact on me. They were also coaches, John Tompkins, Casey Jones, and Gary West. And I don't know if it was just having a male teacher to have a first role model, as a coach and worked with us in athletics. At that time, you couldn't play any elementary sports until you got to 7th grade. So 6th grade, it was still, you're still just doing PE and things of that nature. But we had been doing Little League baseball in the summers and stuff. Okay. So I knew Coach West from that, and then the other 2 guys, Coach Tompkins coached us in baseball, and then Casey Jones ended up being our high school basketball coach when I was in high school. But they had a huge impact on me. And then Bill Jarrett was a high school math teacher. He was a high school baseball coach, and through the rec department, they hired high school players to run their rec program. It was during the day. It wasn't, if there were any parents there, it was a shock. It was usually just the kids. So the players, they had a big draft. Mm-hmm. They picked the teams, and then if your teams weren't playing, you were umpiring. And then played 2 days a week. They also had t-ball and softball going on, and then they had I guess they called it Pony League back then when you got a little bit older that you played in. Yeah. So Coach Jarrett, he had his hands on us from the time I was really small, and I still love Coach Jarrett, but he always said he was going to retire when his son, who was my freshman roommate in college, Brett, when he got old enough to play varsity baseball, he was going to retire. And we didn't believe him because Brett played golf, but that's what he ended up doing. And Hal Wooten, he coached us in summer ball and different things too. He was our JV coach, and then he moved up to varsity when we moved up to varsity. So you had people that invested for a long time period in us. Small county, when I was at Allegheny, we probably think we had about 140 in my senior class. Oh, wow. So it's bigger than now, but still a small county. And the numbers naturally whittled themselves down, and teams were defined as you kind of came along, that kind of thing. But as far as football goes, Tom Smith, he was my JV coach, and then his brother Jim was the varsity coach. So when we got ready to move up to varsity, Jim retired from coaching. He was the wrestling coach as well. Okay. So Coach Smith was my high school football coach all the way through. So another one who invested a lot in us, and think the world of Coach Smith as well. But the reason I ended up being a math teacher, one, math was something that I was good at, but was it because of Coach Jarrett? I mean, I still tell him when I see him how much I appreciate him, and he just had a way about him of making you believe you could do, honestly, probably more than you could do. Really? I mean, he just had confidence in you, and you didn't want to disappoint him. And Coach Smith was the same way. I had some really good coaches and people around me that, kind of led me in that direction.
Right. How did you said that they had confidence in you. In what ways did those coaches kind of show that? How did they express that to you?
Well, two things come to mind. Coach Jarrett had already, he wasn't going to be our varsity coach anymore, but we were playing in the summer league. It was the Babe Ruth League back then. And we were playing at Elkin. They had a kid that was pitching, and he was probably throwing middle 80s and throwing a good slider from middle 80s. I mean, it was good. And I didn't have a real productive at bat. Coach Jarrett wasn't coaching. He was there watching. And he came over to the dugout and said, "Would you just move up a little closer to the plate and stay on it and try to drive it to right center, and you'll hit it?" And I thought, well, he says, "I will." So, okay. I mean, and that's what I did. I mean, it's just, they just made you feel like if they thought you could do it, then you could do it. And there wasn't anything, wasn't anything you could doubt about it. You just did it.
Wow. And I guess that kind of came from, you talked about how they had you for a long time, right? Probably it's probably 4 or 5 years at that point, right?
Yeah, well, Coach Jarrett, he was with us from the time we started playing Little League. That rec program, Coach West went through the community and picked people up on the activity bus and took us to Sparta, and we would play ball all day, and they had free lunch at the high school, and then they had that pool up behind the high school you could go hang out at the pool. I mean, life was good for me. Absolutely. So they knew you. They knew who your family was. And they followed you. And, they're just small community, so everybody knew everybody, and you just didn't want to disappoint them. You just wanted to be part of it.
Absolutely.
I didn't finish my story about Coach West and how I got off track. But we were playing in a JV game, and I was playing right guard, and we got inside the 5, and I guess it was like third down, and we hadn't scored, and he called timeout, and Coach Smith came out there, and he's doing his hand on his head like this, "God, boys, y'all I don't know what to do with y'all." And we had to put our hands on our knees, and then the backs were behind. I just kind of raised up and said, "Run 42 counter dive." He looked, now he wants to call plays. He thinks he knows what we want to run. Well, just run that then if that's what you want to do. You better make it work. Of course, the running back, that was between me and the guard. Me and the center. Yeah. He walks in the end zone, and when I came off the field, he was just grinning at me because that was just his way. He knew that if I said that, we would make it work somehow. So that was part of it, too. They empowered you.
Yes.
And that's showing faith in you by giving you, some ownership, I guess.
Yeah. What was your favorite sport to play growing up? I know you ended up a head football coach, but you also, if I recall, you were a head baseball coach at Starmount for 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Little trivia. Starmount Jeopardy coming up. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but which was your favorite?
We couldn't play school ball till we got to 7th grade.
Right.
We did have that in the summertime. I know a lot of the rec leagues here end when school gets out, and then they're playing travel ball. It wasn't like that then. Right. You didn't get to play ball till summer came, and you looked forward to it until summer got there. Now, they did have a rec basketball program in the winter, and Allegheny's got a good tradition of wrestling, so they had some wrestling stuff going on even back then. But I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
What was your favorite sport, Coach?
So it depended on what time of year it was. In the fall, it was definitely football. And then in the winter, it was basketball. And then in the spring, even though we couldn't play till summer, it was baseball.
Yeah, it was baseball.
It depended on what time of year it was.
What effect did being a multiple sport athlete do you think that had an effect on you then becoming a coach and an educator and kind of staying around sports. That's something I think about a lot with me is, I was one of those kids that my mom was a school teacher. I was already at the schoolhouse, all the time. There were kids playing out in the field. I wanted to go out and be with them.
Absolutely.
And I look back on my time as being a teacher's kid, and I couldn't imagine anything different. Do you think that maybe had an effect on you as well?
It absolutely did. I mean, you have some kids that are the best athletes no matter what sports season it is. But for me, honestly, I was probably a better baseball player. But when you move from one sport to the next, your role changes when you're not that stud,
Yeah.
And that gives you a point of view that's a little bit different. You sort of start seeing how you can fit in. I remember my junior year in baseball, we went to the Final Four and lost to the eventual state champion. And that a lot of that year, I just DH'd because there was a guy named Jimmy Bogowski who was a senior who had a little bit better arm, a little bit more speed, but he wasn't a very good hitter. So if you compared the two of us, you put us both together, we'd have been real good. So he played outfield that hit, and I was happy as I could be.
Absolutely.
Because I realized that was what was best for us to win. Now, a lot of kids don't look at the world that way. They just look at it. But I think that helped me because I saw from an early age what I needed to do. Like in basketball, I wasn't a great basketball player, but I could see what I could do to help, and that's what got me on the floor.
Absolutely.
So I think that helped me.
So it was the drive to be on the floor or on the field, to be a role player in any way.
As long as we could win, I didn't care.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. I ask my offensive linemen this all the time. Do you like to win or do you hate to lose?
I hate to lose.
Absolutely. That's the camp I'm in as well, Coach.
Yeah.
I don't really care if I win as long as I don't lose.
Yeah.
Honestly, eventually, toward the end of my career, the hating losing part was when I got to the point where I was just relieved we won instead of being happy we won. I realized something's got to change.
What do you believe is the most important quality for a successful high school varsity football coach or just varsity coach?
It's easy to say stuff like honesty, integrity, character. Sometimes that seems too generic. So my answer is going to be empathy. And I think that's because in my way of looking at a team, everybody, especially in football where you don't cut people, everybody can find somewhere that they can contribute. I heard a coach one time say you have 77 starters. And I went, what? And then I got to thinking, all your special teams, if you start,
you do.
So you can find a place people can get on the field. And even if they're not able because of size or strength or speed or whatever, they can contribute somewhere. They can contribute in practice squad player, whatever it happens to be. And you have to look at it from their perspective. They want to be out there. They want to contribute. They want to, feel like they're a part of something. So you have to have empathy to relate to them. Too many coaches just look at them as another step to win. And they're people. They're kids. They're not doing it for any other reason than because they want to be there. And football's way too hard to not want to be there and to feel appreciated. So empathy is something that I think's important.
Absolutely. I'm reminded, I just kind of had a flashback for a second of a memory of being down there on that practice field, and I don't know why I had done it. I played the easiest position in wing T offense. I played center, block back. And I recall a moment where I just had a day where my brain was not where it needed to be. And I kept stepping to the gap we're trying to run through. We're running 32 guard trap, and I keep stepping into the 2-hole. And eventually, Coach, he comes up to me and says, you know what you want to do, so just do it. Just do it the right way like you know you want to do it. And turned around and walked off. And I didn't mess up again for the rest of the day. Right? Easiest job. I couldn't get it done, and just something that simple. I remember that. Just clear as day in you telling that. But
You didn't want to mess up. Sometimes if you're focusing on not messing up, that's what you do. That's why I never said the F word.
Yeah.
Ball security, take care of the ball. You never say the F word.
Yes, never say the F word.
Because you don't want that in their mind,
No, of course not.
It's like if there's a perfect game or something happening, never bring up the perfect game.
Yeah, don't talk to him.
Yes.
Just look at him. Don't talk to him. That is such an interesting answer though. We've talked about empathy in coaching and how in our personal conversations, and then how, it just doesn't, we don't see that anymore, right? We just see, I feel like in coaching now, or at least in society's view of coaching, you either have the people that love Bobby Knight, or you have the people that think people that coach like that are terrible. And there's no kind of gray area or in between. What kind of led you to believing that empathy is the most important question?
Well, when I was a position coach or just could coordinate the defense or whatever, you saw kids that, I don't know how to put it, you saw kids that would have given anything to have the ability.
Yes.
And they just didn't have the ability, but they wanted to so bad. And you have to appreciate that and let them know that, hey, there's something here for you. You can belong.
Absolutely. So, Coach, throughout your career, how did you kind of come to how you balanced winning games versus developing your student athletes? I've heard you say, they're your kids. So, how did you approach that?
I guess I always treated them as my kids, but once I had daughters, once I had Ashley, it hit me that, hey, she's going to have a fella one of these days. Yeah. And what kind of fella do I want her to have?
Absolutely.
And between that, I got tired of kids or coaches saying to kids, you need to be a better leader. Okay, what does that mean? How do they become better leaders if you don't help them?
Right.
So it started that way, trying to improve our community. And so many kids, from the time I started till the time I ended, the home situations of so many kids changed. And there was just a much bigger need for them to have some guidance, I guess is the way to think of it.
Maybe that a role model, or more specifically, maybe a male role model, or just somebody that they know cares about them. Right.
I mean, the whole concept of playing the game is to win, so that part wasn't going to change. I wanted to win.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when you look back after 20 years, what do you remember? You might remember a certain score of a game, or we went to such and such round of the playoffs, but you're going to remember other things, and those other things are what really matter.
Really matter. Absolutely. So this next question is, I've got some side questions that go along with this question, so I want you to kind of think about the ones that come right off the top of your head. So what are some of your favorite memories from your coaching career?
Well, one of them is kind of weird. I don't remember if it was Andrew Smithers or Gatlin Welborn was supposed to be running footballs for us on a varsity game night, and they weren't there. So I have to turn around and look at the stands and think, okay, what little kid do I know that can do this?
Yeah.
And I just happened to see Ashley, who was about 11 probably at the time, 10 or 11. And thankfully it wasn't the most intense game. I mean, I felt like we were going to be fine. So her running footballs that night is something I'll always remember. Kind of wanting to watch for her, but at the same time, into what I'm doing and watching out of one eye and being so proud of her and seeing her come off with the ball, like this, and me having to say, hey, let me show you how to hold that. You can't do that. That's something. We played over at Elkin one night in about 2002, somewhere right in there. Mm-hmm. And James Houston was playing. Elkin had a really good team during that stretch. And our tunnel went from the far end back toward the scoreboard to about the scoreboard end's 20. It was that long. So anytime I hear Eminem's Lose Yourself, whatever year that came out is when that was, I can see Alicia Hyman, which is James's mom, dancing in the tunnel as we're getting ready to run out. And that we played really well that night. It was a good game. And there's other games. We, obviously in '98 when we beat Maiden at Maiden, that was a big night. We played South Columbus when I was at South Brunswick. And I think there was one penalty, and it was like a offsides, one penalty. And
one penalty in the whole game?
In the whole game. I think they beat us like 16-14, and it was just a bloodbath as far as how physical the game was. Wow. Jack Hawley was there. They were running wing tee stuff. Oof. It was such a good game that the official asked Coach Force afterwards, can I get a copy of that game? It's the best high school football game I've ever officiated.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was a good one. And then we played New Hanover one night, and Carlister Crumpler was playing for them, and we throw an interception, which still mad about. But anyhow, we're on to like 3, and instead of giving it to our best athlete on a fullback dive or something, he's going to make Carl Lester step up and try to tackle the fullback, and he's going to dump it over his head to the tight end for a touchdown.
Right.
Well, he was too good of an athlete. He jumped and tipped it and caught it in the end zone. He finally went down in front of our bench at about our 35 or 40 with our tailback, who had 205 pounds, holding on to his belt and this much of his butt shining.
Oh,
and
my
I still
gosh.
say that's the only reason he fell down is his butt was hanging out.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Carl Lester was his dad. It's Algie Crumpler. He played tight end and was in the NFL for a long time.
Oh, my gosh.
Carl Lester played at East Carolina. I can't remember. Algie played at Carolina, I think. Anyway,
Anyway.
it was a big memory.
Wow.
And
So-
we had a big fight at Pender County one night. It was a pretty big memory. Not a good one, but still a big memory.
Right, yeah.
Lots of memories.
Lots of them. You just had a lot of memories there about the coast, and that makes me think of a new question, which is you've coached on the coast, you've coached in the Western region. I don't know that many other coaches, personally I don't, that can kind of say that. My brother being one of them, but I don't listen to anything he says anyway. Yes, I do. Chuck, I know you're listening. You know, in North Carolina, there's kind of Western football's better or Eastern football's better, or Western football is more smash mouth and Eastern football is more speed oriented. And what do you see the difference between East and West in North Carolina?
When you look at the successful teams in the East and how their coaches coach it, it's not that much different than the successful teams in the West and how their coaches coach it.
Really?
It's still old school. It's still hard-nosed. It's still physical, play defense, run the ball. You'll still have some teams that throw it. I mean, I'm not saying anything against those kind of teams,
Right,
but
of course not.
with the Clintons and the Wallace Rose Hills and the South Columbuses and those people, they coach their kids just like the Swain Counties and the
Right.
Murphys and the Starmounts. I mean,
Yeah.
now the type of kids you have is different. I mean, unless you're like South Columbus, which is more, or Wallace is too, more rural, you have those kind of kids, but the makeup's a little bit different.
Gotcha. A little bit more urban than rural, blue collar versus, yeah. That brings me to another question that one of your former players asked.
This will be interesting.
How nervous, and I guess this is actually going to be a multi-part question because you've been in multiple state championships. How nervous were you in the state championship games? And this is why I really wanted to ask this question. Coach Allen, this is a great question. How did you decompress afterwards?
Okay, so I really coached in 4.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
2 for Starmount and 2 for Williamston. And when I
Okay.
say for Williamston, Harold Robinson had us come down there and put us in the booth in the state championship game 2 years. But anyway, that was cool to get that they were able
Wow.
to win it. Now, they didn't win the next year, the other year, but still. Of course, that first year, that kid rushed for 310 yards, I think, for Williamston.
Oh, my
He could run around in here for 10 minutes and we couldn't touch him. Unreal. But anyway, how you decompress, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. When we won in 98, that feeling, obviously,
Yeah.
elation, all that. And then when we lost in 14, that feeling was different because I felt like we lost to a better team. I mean, we could have done some things different. It could have been a different outcome. But if we played them 10 times, they're probably going to win 9.
Right. It was kind of a
that's just-
tippy cap moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's nothing against our kids. That's just, I mean, this school's been here 57 years and we've been there twice. So
Right. Right.
our kids are obviously special. But
Yes.
when you know you've given everything you can and it just wasn't quite enough that day, you just don't beat yourself up over it.
Right. You can go home and hang your hat.
Yeah, when we lost to Newton in 08, I never thought twice about that because they were just way better than us. And then the next week they destroyed whoever they played in the state championship.
To add my personal thing to that, because I was on that team, the bus ride home, that was my time to, I'll go ahead and say it, cry about it, you know, feel my feelings about it, because that was a ride, buddy. As a player, that was a ride.
Yeah.
It was crazy to be on. Taking that bus trip home, I just kind of let myself feel everything. And I was a little sad for that first week, and then I saw the score to the state championship game, and I said, oh, okay. Tip my cap.
Well, the week before, we're beating South Columbus, they played in the state championship the year before. They were the number 1 seed, and we go down there and beat them that high, and then you know, that was hard to handle.
Yeah.
Disappointment's hard, but when you know you've done everything you can, I don't know if you can deal with it better.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a feeling of kind of respect for yourself.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, second guess and think if we would have or if we could have or, you know.
If a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his rear end on the ground.
Absolutely.
I mean, like in 14, right before halftime, we ended up going for it on 4th down there.
Yes, I remember this.
Because, I mean, a field goal at that point, it's not going to be a 17-14 game. I mean, it's already showing it's not going to be.
Right.
And I don't regret the call. I mean, it's what we practiced. And
Absolutely.
I mean, that kid got lucky. He ran into him.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch it on film, he's got the ball.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
Yeah.
and he's looking.
Yeah,
He's
he
looking
is.
at the fake and just basically, there.
Oh, I mean, he really is shocked.
Wow.
You can see it on his face. This is a question that I'm sure we're going to have a lot of different responses to from you, and please feel free to mention all that come to mind. What is the most inspiring story of growth or perseverance or development that you've witnessed from one of your athletes?
Yeah, it'd have to be Keith. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Keith Bryant he had cancer, and coming into his freshman year, we were excited for him to get up here, and he had been doing radiation treatments on his ankle, if I remember everything correctly. And he was at the skating ring in Jonesville, and somebody jumped on his back playing like kids do, and broke his ankle. So, because it was weaker. Whatever.
Right.
So he didn't get to play his freshman year, but to go from there to the athlete, how hard he worked and what all he did, you just can't tell Keith you can't do that. Because if you say you can't, you might as well get ready for it.
Absolutely. I played with Keith. To give you a story, I'm an 8th grader. He had a system where I can't remember if my mom would bring me or if a bus brought me. I can't remember how you.
Well, that was before the middle school, so I guess.
Yeah, we
Tony
were.
brought you.
I guess she
don't
did.
remember either.
And we would show up out here in the back or back there in the back parking lot, get out of the car, walk down to the field house, and you would learn how to do power cleans and deadlift and how to bench the correct way. And I remember learning the plyometrics and thinking you were crazy.
We were way
Cole, I
ahead of-
want you to jump from that stall mat to that stall mat. And I'm going, there ain't no way.
We were way ahead of a lot of people on a lot of that stuff. You see a lot of that stuff on TV now, and it's like we were doing that 10 years ago.
Our first introduction to Keith Bryant. So mom drops me off. I get out of the car. I come around the gate, and you know those cut-off telephone poles about waist high back there behind the field house?
Yeah.
They have just ended school, and I guess he had 4th period weight. I mean, obviously he had 4th period weightlifting. He's hooting and hollering. They're going somewhere, and they're going to have a good time, and he's got his shirt off, throwing it around his head. He sees the telephone pole, runs up to it, upside down, jumps up onto it, and knocks out about 25 upside down push-ups.
Jeez.
On this telephone pole. Hops down, looks at me, and goes, "Hey, how are you?" Hops in the car.
Superhuman.
And I'm little 8th grade Coach Patterson, 250 pounds and I ain't touched a weight yet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what in the world have I just walked into? Wild.
We were in the wrestling room doing our winter agility stuff, tumbling stuff like Florida State did. And we had been doing all of our stuff. You remember all that. But we were standing there catching our breath because it was hot in that little room and whatnot. And Keith is just standing there. I mean, I'm standing there talking to him. And all at once he takes off running. And I'm like, where's he going? I mean, he's running toward a wall. I'm like, he runs 2 or 3 steps up the wall, does a backflip, lands, and comes walking back over there to me. I'm
Yes.
like,
Oh my God.
Keith, what are you doing?
He did crazy stuff like that all the time.
Jeez.
Crazy stuff. I've watched him do backflips off the picnic tables in the courtyard.
Wow.
One of my favorite Keith stories, sorry, I can talk about this all day. Do you remember Mount Airy, first game of the year out there, 2008? We did not win that game, but they have messed up and kicked the ball off to the wrong guy. His name was Rashawn Gaither. Rashawn's going down the sideline. I'm a fat lineman. I'm not on the field. And I'm watching Rashawn, and before Rashawn can cross my vision, here goes Keith, boom, right by him. I mean, by him.
Yeah.
And he's screaming at him the whole time, follow me, come on, Rashawn, are you slow? In the middle of the game. And they take this thing back to the house. I will never forget that as long as I live.
Jeez.
That was a crazy memory.
Speaking of Rashawn, he did a backflip off the goalpost and landed on his feet.
I remember that.
I said, if I ever see you do that again, I'll kill you. Don't
Oh, my word.
Did like that.
Yeah. Rashawn was one of the few people, other people have heard me say this, he is one of the few running backs I've ever seen in real life that could be running at full speed, put his left foot in the ground, and in one step on a 90-degree angle be back at full speed.
Right.
And he was dangerous on the jet, buddy. Yeah. He'd plant that foot in the ground, and he got north and south in a hurry.
That's killer.
The thing about Rashawn was he was never looking at this guy. He was looking at the next guy.
Yep.
Because you ain't tackling me. I'm going to see what he's doing. He knew how to hesitate and speed up. And
change of speed.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I mean, it was incredible. I want to ask this same question, but I'm about a specific season, and I'm trying to think of how to word the question. How would you describe the growth of the 1998 state championship team from game one to the state championship, I guess?
Well, Coach Hole had left. He had left to go to Bristol, and Coach Hitchens was, first-year head coach.
Yes.
That summer, I convinced him to get rid of all the machines that we had in the weight room and go to complete Olympic lifting. Mm-hmm. And that summer, we put in Nebraska stuff. That was before I got to know Ethan Reeve at Wake Forest as well as I do. But anyway, so that summer, it's teaching them all the Olympic lift stuff and them wanting to be good at it, wanting to be strong, wanting to do well. And we get to the first day of hitting practice, and Coach Holt had this thing he called 4-second runs, and you had to do so many per quarter. So he'd say, okay, we're doing 4-second runs, 8 a quarter. And what you would do is everybody would line up, and he'd blow the whistle. You'd run as fast as you could for 4 seconds. He'd blow a whistle, and you'd stop, turn around, back.
The worst kind of suicide.
Yeah. So if you're running as hard, he said most plays don't last that long, so we're going. And then you'd take the end of a quarter, you're supposed to take a rest,
right?
And all that stuff. Well, they didn't make it through it. I think Coach Hutchins ended up having to do like 3 or 4 at the end just because they couldn't do it.
Right.
Coming up the hill, Davis Howell, who was one of our best players, he said, I don't know if we can win a game. But then we go to North Surrey, get beat no overtime. First game of the year. And their confidence is shaken, but they want to win. We just got on a roll. I mean, I don't know, it's like when they got behind, they had something about them that they were going to continue to fight and pull their way through it. We beat East Surrey on the last second Hail Mary into the end zone.
Wow.
For example, at Maiden, the night we won, Richard Tolbert's on the sideline, and he tells one of the guys, I'm going to go in there and get the football. We'll do it. So send him in on defense. He's in a pile, and he comes up with a football. That's how they work. I mean,
so, Coach, I think one of the things that a lot of young coaches struggle with is developing a practice plan, right? Like, what is my identity in practice? How do I run my practices? So can you walk us through what a typical day under your leadership would look like? I know that he and I already have some experience in this, but just for the listeners. And
I'm a big believer in routine because I think kids do well when they're in a set routine. Now, that don't mean you can't switch things up and variety, have a little variety and throw some things in that I don't know if they're necessarily fun, but are different enough the kids take it as fun.
Right.
So that's why I always had a practice plan written out and would always post it in the locker room because I think y'all just looked to see how much running you had first, but at least you could see what we were going to do that day. And for me, when I was coordinate the defense, that's how I thought about it. I'd think, okay, what things do we need to get in and what order, what's the way we're going to do it? And we did the same thing in football. We would look at, on offense, we would look at, all right, our biggest thing we're going to work on is the jet. So how are we going to put the jet in? And then we would, step it out. And
run jet rocket drill for days.
Yeah, but people could, it's almost like playing an option team. People could try to practice the way we would run the jet, but they couldn't mimic it at all.
Right.
So, yeah, but, you got to figure out what you're going to hang your hat on and then how you're going to practice it.
Right.
And some of that stuff stayed the same from year to year, and sometimes it would change based on the team. Like, I don't remember if we were doing number tackling when you were playing, or if that came a little bit later.
Number tackling came when you hired me.
Okay.
That was my first foray into it. At the end of my career, we were doing gator tackling.
Yeah,
Okay.
because of the concussion stuff. But anyhow, that number tackling changed. You just adapt it to what you're doing, but it still stays in the context of how you're going to practice.
Gotcha. I think a lot of young coaches struggle with, I see this at the middle school level and the JV level and the youth level a lot, kind of the higher youth levels, where, coaches don't really know when to make an adjustment or how to make an adjustment in the game. Can you talk about what your approach to that was? I mean, I can remember you talking about, when I figure out where he is, I'll know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So when you found out where he was, how did that thought process go along to make your adjustments?
One game in particular that would help understand that would be when we played East Lincoln, when Chaz Surratt was a freshman. We went into that game, and we knew they were playing a kid, outside linebacker, that wasn't real good.
Okay.
And in my mind, if I can get that freshman in the game, we're going to be in better shape.
Right.
So I don't think you were with us then. This was in about 12, maybe, somewhere.
Yeah, I was at college.
Well, anyway, we go into that game, and we ran power at that kid 7 straight plays. They took him out, and they put in an NFL linebacker. So it didn't work out quite like I thought.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, what we would try to do is use unbalanced formations to make them make an adjustment. And then when they moved the guy, then I already knew what I was going to do, because by moving him, that was going to open up thus and such.
Right.
So it kind of, if you had all your knives in the drawer, they couldn't be right by using unbalanced.
Gotcha.
Now, some years we didn't have the players to run the plays we needed to adjust to that. But that's what I meant by, if I know where he's at.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like I would never ask him. I just want to know what number made the tackle, because I knew where he was playing and what he was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And if he made a tackle on something he wasn't supposed to be there, I knew what play we needed to run to take advantage of that.
To exploit. Wow. Okay. I always thought, being a player underneath you, I was always, some of the most information that I learned was pregame, or not pregame, but walkthrough, before pregame. And I don't know if you noticed this, we were all very quiet when we'd go through pregame or walkthrough. And some of us was because I'm sure some of them were afraid to just speak, but that was the moments where I was really trying to learn the game of football from you, where you would talk about, okay, well, this is the guy we're going to try to put in a bind tonight. This is the guy that we've got to block no matter what. On this play specifically, you've got to come back and tell me what he does. And then trying to put those puzzle pieces together as you're, I need to find out these pieces of information. Well, why is he figuring out those pieces of information? And the reason I mention this is I think a lot of players need to maybe kick in that mindset of, don't just do what they tell me, but try to figure out why he's telling me to do this. I think a lot of younger players might need to kind of change their thinking on that and try to think of, why is my coach asking me to do this? And if I ask why, how can that make me a better player?
Right.
Yeah, your freshman year, you're which foot do I step with, and what is my rule for this particular play? But by your junior year, you should be going, okay, we're running this play because we're trying to set up this.
Right.
I mean, it should be a growth.
Yes.
And by your senior year, when you all would come off and tell me something, it was something I needed to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would listen. If you were a sophomore or junior, you might tell me something and I'd just go on with what I was doing. I mean, no offense, it's just the level of what you understand change.
Coaches are in charge of kind of deciding where players fit in, right? This kid looks like a running back. This kid looks like a defensive end. This kid looks like an outside linebacker as opposed to an inside linebacker. So help us, could you talk a little bit about, when that freshman comes out and you don't really know him, how do you figure out where he fits into the puzzle that is your team?
Well, body type and speed are the first two things you look for. I mean,
Right.
and then you mentioned something about before we started this about mentality and what they're going to do if they get hit, and if he's got any mean streak in him. I mean, you don't take a kid that isn't very tough at all and put him inside linebacker. That's not going to work. It's got to be somebody that don't mind contact, or
Right.
And if you've got a tight end that can't catch, he'd make a great guard. Or if you got a fullback that is a good blocker but can't hold on to the ball, he'd make a great tight end. I mean, you sort of just start moving them around based on what you see that they can do. That's why flicker football was always so important to me.
Yeah.
I would watch and see. You find out who to trust who the natural leaders are, what they're capable of doing.
So for the people not from around here.
Flicker football.
Yes, sir.
Carolina football, Carolina tag. I don't know all the names for it. Basically, you throw it, and once you throw it, you can lateral it.
Gotcha.
So it's flicker football.
Gotcha. Okay. And you're just watching little kids do this?
Well, I used to do it weightlifters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, watch your own kids do it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Me as a 205-pound kicker.
You took it serious though, man. Like
I did.
you studied it.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I am with anything. When I get into
Right.
something, I learn everything I can about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Wow.
just in shorts one day, kicking a 45-yard field goal. Hey, man, how are you?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Hey, come over here.
Yeah.
Next
You
thing
go
you know.
there when we go to special teams now.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach Brown going, hey,
Yeah.
come on down here. Coach, a season is a long time. A season's a long time. I think back to that 2008 year, and we rolled in there in May, and I hung up that helmet in dang nigh December.
Yeah, it was after, I guess the Final Four game was at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, Thanksgiving rolling out. How did you, as a head coach, kind of keep, every season has its up and downs. How did you keep the guys in the locker room motivated throughout the year?
That's something that it's hard because you want everybody to want to win and want to work as much as you do. But some kids they're out there to have fun too. So it's a fine balance of how hard you push. That's one thing you all can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would always put on there, we're going to be done at.
Yes.
And we were done at
Yes.
because I got one more played to death with other coaches. And I hated it
Yeah.
because it became survival instead of getting better. So I always said, we're going to be done at whatever time, and that lets you go harder. And I think that's one thing that a lot of coaches do wrong. They just keep on. And that's why tempo in practice was so important to me. If we go faster, we can get as much work done in a shorter time.
Right.
But anyhow, I think that motivated some because you knew you were going to be done at 6:15 or
Right.
whatever. And
Yeah.
you had time to do something else. And I think the parents, especially for JV kids, really did because, they're having to find them rides and
Right.
come and sit in the car. And, they're sitting there for 30 minutes. When are they going to be done? I mean, I think that helped. But that's why I was so big on practice tempo.
Yeah. I can remember thinking, I think it was around maybe the Forbush game of my junior year, thinking, wow, the games are slow. I can remember thinking that.
Yeah.
Like, the game is slow. And then you go to practice and it's like, oh my God, I can't keep up.
Yeah.
Bing, 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 bing. And then you get in the game and Jake comes to the huddle and it's, hey, 2:30 at Jet, waggle at 9. Okay. Nothing, no stress, no nothing,
Right.
I'm walking up to a guy that's looking at me like, oh God, that confidence was awesome. Like, I'm not gassed, he is. That was.
I always want to do 3 plays a minute in practice.
Yeah, jet rocket drill, I think, was faster. If you were the pulling guard and you weren't back in 10 seconds, you got a problem. But that made us better. I mean, I think about how many extra reps we got. Think about how many extra experiences. Okay, well, if he shoots this way or that way, and how do I adjust to it? Like, the guards learned so much about how to pull and be as a big guy, how to be out in space just with that many extra reps.
Right.
And I think that's just invaluable. But
I think I said several times, if we can get 3 extra plays of practice and we practice for 50 days. That's 150 extra times we've ran this.
Right.
So by the playoffs, how much better are we going to be?
Yeah.
And I think everybody's like, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. There was a lot of math.
Yes.
There's a lot of
That
math.
went over my head.
Did he still ask you why when he taught you?
I never had him in math class.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't. He was
Dude.
doing advanced functions.
Something.
Yeah,
Oh
one of the
my
intro
gosh.
ones,
I had him for
which I belonged in. But
algebra. I think I had you for algebra 1 and
Probably.
3. Or algebra 2. It was
2, I
algebra
think
2 at
so,
the end because
yeah.
you went algebra 1, geometry,
Algebra.
algebra 2. And I had him for algebra 1 and algebra 2. And then I'll never forget in algebra 2 walking up to you and going, Coach, I don't understand how to do this problem. Why don't you understand how to do this problem? I'll see you in a minute. I'm going to go back over here and just stare at this problem a little bit longer. But it made me a better student.
Right.
You know, that we talked earlier about how I started learning from you the game, figuring out, well, why? Well, okay, that applies to things outside of football and sports as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's a critical thinking skill, I think, that needs to be developed.
Going back to those reps, I know the first few years I really got into creating practice schedules and things as I would try to do way too much in a short amount of time.
Right.
And I realized that, hey, these guys are getting like 5 reps at whatever we're working on, which is not beneficial. And to draw it out a little more and focus on getting more reps, like that is so crucial, especially for coaches that are just starting out. The more reps, the better.
In this case, quantity equals quality, right? Like you get as many reps as you can, and that will help you become better.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, practice does make perfect. I mean, I guess it's just a new way of saying that, but quantity can be quality.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's as simple as if you're doing ND defense for baseball guys, if you're doing ND defense, instead of 5 minutes of individual drills, 10 minutes. Just allowing a couple extra minutes, a few extra reps every day.
Absolutely.
Nice and simple.
Biggest thing I got frustrated at is when coaches stopped everything to tell one kid something.
Mm-hmm.
Coach you from here to the huddle. Let's go.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's don't stop everything for.
I had a coach that I've coached with. He may be a guest, hopefully pretty soon, that said, "You follow him around all the time." And I thought, I guess I do. And he said, "No, I like it. Keep doing it." I was like, okay. And then I got to thinking about it later, and I was like, well, that's what Chris Brown, Sandy Grinton, Joe Hutchins, you know, that's what they did with me in the offensive line.
Yeah.
You know, we'd go run a play, and somebody's getting me on the way back to the huddle.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's telling Jake walks into the huddle, he disappears, we run the next play. Hopefully nobody says anything to me on the way back to the huddle, you know. But I learned it was that crash course, you know, like
learning on
boom,
the fly.
here we go.
Yeah.
You know, you got to learn on the fly, just like you said. And this is a question. So you and I had an experience where I don't mind sharing this on the podcast and in public. I showed my butt one night on the sidelines because I was very frustrated.
Untypical for you.
Thank you.
I would think.
I don't know.
See, I didn't know you back then. but-
I was a very
Yeah, let me rephrase that, because now I'm thinking about you coaching me in baseball and getting pretty rowdy. And yeah, that's kind of typical.
yeah. I got a little rowdy.
Yeah.
But I was always rowdy about things I perceived as insults.
Right.
And I do remember what had happened. I guess I don't want to go into too much detail about it. I flew off the handle on the sideline for about 2 or 3 minutes. He actually never saw it, but he was told about it.
Yeah.
And as he rightfully should have done, removed me from the game, walked over to me and said, "You're done for the night." I am not ashamed at all to say that was the kick and shock that I needed. I remember bawling on the sideline that night.
Yeah.
Because I felt like not only had I disappointed him and the coaching staff and my parents up in the stands, I disappointed myself.
Right.
And we had a conversation after the game. I think I came to you. I can't recall if I did. I think I did.
Sure.
I think I came to you, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Coach, I'm sorry." And the first words out of his mouth were, "It's okay. You're going to do better next time." I'll never forget that as long as I live. Yeah. Do better next time. You're going to do better next time. And that we talked about my character ed last time, and I'm sure that will be a question or a topic on our podcast at a later date. I can't tell you how many times in that stage in my life I held on to that. Right. You're going to do better next time. And I'm telling this story to ask you this next question, which is, confidence plays a role. And whether that's confidence within a player's self and being, or whether it's their confidence in their abilities. How did you approach managing players' emotions if somebody was in a slump, or you knew somebody was having a hard time at home, or maybe they were really struggling in school, or maybe their girlfriend had just dumped them, or, as coaches, I think a lot of the public doesn't understand that, God forbid their mom and daddy's in a car wreck, or grandma and grandpa die, or something tragic happens. You have a very deep relationship with that kid, whether you realize it or not as a coach. And I don't think the public really understands that, and that can take a toll on you. But getting back to my original question, how did you, learn to kind of manage players' emotions and develop some emotional maturity in your players? Because that was a moment that developed a lot for me.
There's two sides of that. The problems the kids are having and things they're going through, that's where that empathy comes in. You have to understand that, okay, I'm breaking up with a 16-year-old girl I thought I was going to always be with.
Yes.
That love that some dismiss as puppy love is real. You can't dismiss that.
Right.
So you have to have empathy for that part of it. But then, Jesus Christ has forgiven me. Yeah. And who would I be to not forgive other people when they made a mistake? I don't know if y'all ever paid attention or not, but when somebody got in trouble and they had to do their running, I stayed and they did their running.
Yes, sir.
And I walked with them over the hill. And from there to here, from there to the field house, conversations took place. Sometimes we had to just stop. And that's, where you have an opportunity to let them know, look, you screwed up. It's over. You were punished. Let's move on.
Right.
And I think that was, if I did anything well, I think that's something I was pretty good at.
I will agree with that 1,000%. 1,000%. There's so many things that I look back on in reflection that I noticed at the time, and I filed it away and didn't know that I'd filed it away. Right. One of those things was telling another coach, no, I'm staying with him, and kind of being a little firm about it. And I remember thinking, that's interesting. Why? He's busy. He's got other stuff going on. I filed that away.
Well, kids know they've messed up generally. And honestly, kids want to be held accountable for when they messed up.
Right.
But they also want to know that it's going to be all right. I've
Right.
messed up. It ain't the end.
Yeah.
And I think if you're the head coach and you put it on an assistant, you're missing a connection with the kid. So I always thought that was important.
Absolutely. So you kind of covered if, they got in trouble, but when I was a very young coach, he was towards the end of your career. I was back there on the back deck with the JVs, making sure the cats were herded. Right. And he grabbed me and brought me in to talk to a kid. And I'll never forget him saying, Cole, I want you to sit in on this because you need to learn how to talk to these kids in these situations. I don't want to share that kid's situation. How do you handle receiving that information about a kid that's having some home issues or some difficulties? Maybe a tragedy happens, whatever. How do you handle receiving that information? How do you handle, hey, we're going to, as a coaching staff or as the head coach, I need to sit down and have a conversation and let this kid and have a conversation?
You have to look at it like you're taking care of your own. What would I want somebody to do to my own kid in this situation?
Right.
And it goes back to empathy. I know that seems crazy, but, you got to hold them to standards. But if it's a situation where somebody's done something stupid or there's a family situation going on, you don't want to embarrass them if they need something, but they need to know you'll get it if they need something.
Right.
You need somewhere to stay.
Right.
You just handle it where everybody else doesn't necessarily know what's going on, but they know you handled it.
Right. How do you ride that line of I know something's up and I need you to know that I'm willing to help provide it, give it, whatever, without kind of, crossing over the line into, maybe in a way that a kid might misinterpret what you're trying to offer.
Yeah, that's a tough balancing act because you want them to feel like they can tell you, and sometimes what they need to tell you, they really can't tell you because it's going to put you in a place where legally you got to do something that you don't really want to do.
Right.
Social services or whatever, but you just give them an out. If you need somewhere or if I can get you this, just let me know,
Right.
Let them know you care. And most of the time they'll do that.
Right.
Most of the time. Right. And you just handle it. Nobody else needs to know what's going on. You just take care of it.
Absolutely. Coach, we've talked about kids that maybe don't have the best home life, so we're going to kind of change gears. Parent involvement is huge, right, at every level of sports, whether it's youth. I've had some people question me about my treat them like a puppy statement on the last podcast, which I stand by. I stand by that statement. But that's huge, right? Making sure that parents are involved, trusting of you with their child, believing that you're in it for the right reasons. How do you handle relationships with parents? How did you navigate that?
You got to remember they're giving you their most treasured possession, and they're entrusting you with their time, their safety, their their growth, their well-being, whatever word you want to say. And I think the majority of parents, if not all, knew that I was going to try to help their kids physically, emotionally, spiritually, every way that I possibly could to help them. Some wanted to go a little farther over the line in wanting to be involved, and that's hard because you sometimes that's coming from a really good place, and sometimes you worry what place that's coming from, or I always did.
Yeah.
So I always tried to funnel them into things that kept them away from me.
And when you say away from me.
Yeah. So they're funneling things into the kids, like a Wednesday night meal or
yes. Okay.
Things of that nature.
Gotcha.
Because a perceived in is as good as a real in, because it destroys things.
Wow. Yeah.
Michael Vandal was one of my very best friends. But as long as Connor was here, me and Michael wasn't best friends. And, I kept him at a distance. Right. To be fair to him, to be fair to Connor, to be fair to me.
Did you, immediately my mind goes to this, did you have a preemptive conversation with Michael about that? Or was it kind of like a man-to-man understood kind of thing?
Yeah, we got to be friends through another mutual friend.
Yes.
And until Connor was through, we weren't as close to friends as we are now.
Gotcha.
And that was just...
So that was a conscious decision of yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wow.
To be fair to both of them.
Yeah,
Michael would, if anything, he would want me to have been harder on Connor than necessary, and he would admit that. But the perception, you just got to avoid all that.
Right.
Because if people think it's there, even if it's not, you're already in trouble.
You're already in trouble. Wow. Okay.
Let me say one other thing.
Yes, sir.
I think that's one reason I got... kind of people thought I didn't want help from people. I would have taken any amount of help people would have given me had they went about it in a way that wasn't going to cause problems. Yeah. Okay. So, Coach, coaching it's an ever-evolving thing. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that high school coaches are having to deal with today? And I know you're not, currently a head coach, but I guess maybe over the time of your career, what did you see things moving towards? What problems did you see that maybe the next generation's going to have an issue with this? I always said I wanted to be able to retire before pay for play came into being, and it hadn't yet, but I feel like it's coming.
Right.
And that's a big challenge. What's filtered down from the colleges where kids aren't happy and they transfer is a big challenge, because kids do that now, like go to a different school, try to find a different, circumstance for themselves, whether it's perceived to be good or bad or whatever the situation is.
Right.
That's a huge challenge. The parental involvement seems like it's been really different. They're either not involved at all or too much.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, maybe not too much, but they want to do everything they can. And we love that. We welcome that. But I think kind of what you said earlier, we as coaches are very wary of that, because like you said earlier, a perceived in is still an in.
That's to me, too much is when you're worried about what your kid, where he's playing, what position he's playing, how much he's playing, how many snaps he's getting, how many times he threw the ball, how many times that stuff. If their whole goal was to get a kid a scholarship, they need to be focused on academics, because that's where the money's at.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
that's the way that I got to go to the Appalachian State University. I was very blessed and lucky, and I had parents that worked very hard to help me achieve that. Very thankful for that.
But it's sometimes I worry the whole signing letters of intent thing is going over the top too much. Or I really worry about that. I don't know.
Interesting take there.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and his son's playing in a basketball tournament this weekend, and they're playing against some guy who is, I think, either a rising sophomore or he's currently a sophomore, but he's already signed a letter of intent to go play with Vanderbilt. To my knowledge, you can't even talk to a kid till junior year.
Yeah.
So it's like,
That's
what are we doing?
Wild to me.
Yeah, you could sign a letter of intent now to go back and play lacrosse somewhere. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just, I don't know.
Yeah, I intend to. Doesn't mean I am.
Yeah, I don't know. It just bothers.
Often hear us adults and other adults say that kids have changed. Would you agree with that statement, or would you say that maybe kids haven't changed, but maybe their circumstances have, or their experiences? What's your take on that? Have kids changed?
What we allow them to do has changed. We have allowed them to not accept responsibility for their actions. We've allowed their, parents to come and complain and get consequences changed instead of reinforced once they got home. Kids want structure and discipline. I don't think that's changed at all.
Yeah.
Think about it. When something in the routine of the school day goes wrong, what happens amongst the kids? Chaos, panic. Oh my gosh, this changed, and now their entire mindset is off for the rest of the day. So I fully agree with that. Routine, discipline, teaching that responsibility, absolutely. So I guess in a way, parents have changed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
parents now want to compare themselves based on what their kids are doing, and I don't think
Interesting.
That's very healthy.
Right. Well, I don't want it to sound like we're saying all parents are this way.
No, not
Right.
at all.
Not at all. I think we said last time in our last interview that, we love you, parents.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take us the wrong way, right? Like, we love you. But these are just things that we see.
They see them too. The good parents see them too.
The good parents see them too.
Yeah, they see what we see.
Coach, we at Starmount, we have quite a pretty storied, extensive, we've produced a lot of coaches.
Yes.
And they're kind of spread out. We have really kind of started bringing coaches back. I'm one of them that have played there. And asked a couple guys that I know to send me some questions specifically for you.
Okay.
Quite a few of them have played for you, and they've went on to become coaches, whether they were, as an assistant coach or a head coach. One of the first questions, I got to give a shout out to one of my best buddies, Coach Nicholson, and I thought this question was a really great question. He said, he asks, what were some things that kept bringing you back to coaching when things seemed like you couldn't make things go right?
So knowing Blaine and knowing him thinking about that time period, it was a group of kids that had confidence and belief in me. Caleb,
Right.
Jerome, Keith, Shannon, Shane. I mean, I could name bunches of them that they had confidence in me.
Right.
And wanted me to stay to where they could show that confidence.
Absolutely. His second question, that I love this question, and I've never thought, as somebody that I'm weird, I don't aspire to be a head coach. Leave me down there in the corner with the hogs. Okay, I'll root around and it'll be all right. What is the best thing you did to keep your staff as the head coach kind of all on the same page? Or, that's a lot of different personalities. How did you manage the adults as well as the kids?
In the beginning, it was a bunch of guys I had been coaching with that were friends. I mean, we were all real tight anyway. And by the end, it was a little harder, just to be quite honest, because we had a variety of people that had been other places and been coaches other places. And not necessarily that was a bad thing. It was a good thing, but it was a little harder. Everybody, they knew that loyalty wasn't an issue. I'm not saying that. It was just a little bit different vibe toward the end, I think.
Maybe some stronger held opinions?
Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe that's part of it. And different experiences. In the beginning, it was just a group of guys that we were always close and done everything together, from mowing to painting to, whatever.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So next up, as one of my best friends, I love this guy, Coach Prime. I'm not going to use his real name, but he'll know exactly who I'm talking about. He asked, when you were a position coach, was there a moment as a assistant coach, as a position coach, when you were starting out, that was there a moment where it was like, I want to be a head coach?
That was before I ever started.
Before you ever started.
Yeah.
So that was something from high school, or
through
when
college,
you decided?
I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Really?
When I went for my first I started out at a junior high because I graduated in December, and I finished out a year at a junior high in Hickory. But anyhow, when I went for my first interview, the principal, he was want me to take the job and all that. And I said, well, I need to meet with your football coach. And he said, well, we can make that happen or whatever. So when I first sat down with the football coach, he said, now what's your goals? What's your dream?
Mm-hmm.
I said, I want your job. And he went, what? I said, not the one you got now. I want to be a head coach. And I stayed with him for 7 years because he saw that I wanted to be a head coach.
Yeah. You wanted to be.
And worked and learned and
Right.
that kind of stuff. So
What type of questions did a young Coach Johnson ask in trying to learn about what being a head coach looked like?
first of all, I wanted to be the best position coach I could be. And then I wanted to be over a defense. So I learned my position, then I learned how to run a defense. And then I immediately started studying offenses because if you know the offense, then you know what hurts it. And then once I turned over to the offensive side, I already knew what the defenses were doing. So when you say what questions, I was always looking at, okay, this is a problem for the defense. How do I fix it? What causes the offense problems?
Right.
That's why I enjoyed playing Kelly Holder as much as anybody, because I knew going into the game, all right, Kelly, I'm taking this away. This is what I think you're going to do. And if you do that, I'm taking that away too. And Kelly was always good enough he could get to the third and fourth thing.
Right. It was a chess match.
Yes. That's what made it fun.
So he and I have talked about this, that, you know, sometimes the competitiveness of us as coaches, you know, we get into it. We're fired up, and I love the chess game. We
were at the East-West game, and we had been working all summer on that draw, that wraparound draw that we put in.
Yes.
We've been working on it. Well, at the East-West game, the East team ran a version of it. It wasn't off a sprint draw, but it was a version of it. And we were sitting with Kelly. Kelly was there at us, you know, because we're friends.
Yeah.
And he looked around at me and said, "Don't get no ideas." And I just kind of grinned at him. And when he turned back around, I looked at Adrian and said, "If he only knew." And if you remember, when we ran it, there was nobody on that side of the field.
Not a soul.
And I looked over at Kelly, and he was just shaking his head like... I know he thought to himself, I shouldn't have said anything, but we'd already been doing it.
It wasn't. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, what that looked like. You know, coaches in the conference, you talked about you love playing Kelly Holder, and you talked with him, and, you know, what are some of those stories? Right.
So there was a few, like me and Dave, and I think the world of Dave Diamond, but he got a little miffed at me and they beat us, but we were playing here and had that thunderstorm. I don't know if you were in school then or not.
Yes,
and we had to finish on Saturday morning.
That was the...
Yeah. Okay.
That was the...
But anyway, you know, it's 11 o'clock or so.
Yeah. Yep.
And he says, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, if we stay and finish it, it might be 2 o'clock in the morning." And he said, "Well, if we're going to go home, we need to go now." And I said, "Well, I'll see you in the morning. What time?" I mean, I don't know what he wanted me to do, but we never had no problems. It was miffed for a minute, and then the next time we saw each other, it was back to normal. Would
you say that's an important quality of a varsity coach, that ability to, with other coaches of other programs, disagree respectfully?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Like Richard at Elkin, we'd always got along great with Richard. I see him today, I think the world of Richard. But we played him out here and beat him. And at the game, we go through the line, and I don't know, it wasn't Richard. And then I thought, well, maybe he just didn't think no more about it. But then 2 weeks later or whatever it was, he's retired. And I thought, oh, that's why he was upset.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know, it's things like that.
Little things.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of, for a second, would think, well, it's just the heat of the moment, move on. Now, there's some exceptions to that. There was a time where there was a coach where our meetings were not a lot of fun. None of us particularly cared for him. And that's just the way it was. I won't mention no names, but I think if you asked everybody in the conference, they'd all know who I was talking about.
Okay.
He was just different.
Yeah, I do think that ability, and plus you're modeling for kids. You know, if the kids can see you can be a responsible adult in this moment, then why can't I be a responsible kid?
It's like Joey Price, you know, when I had known Joey from coaching down the East. We go down there and meet him in South Columbus. And I go in his locker room to check on him because most everybody's gone. It was taking us a while to make sure he's all right. Talk to him for a few minutes. After the state championship, after he beats us, me and him walked out together.
Really? I did not know that.
Walked to the buses together. I mean, I love Joey. He's a great friend of mine.
I have to ask, and you can tell me no. What was that conversation?
Actually, I said, he told me, he said, "You know, I lost the first one I ever coached in." I said, "Well, I hope this ain't my last one." And he said, "Well, you know, Coach Jack Holly.
Holly.
He said, Coach Holly lost 4. And I said, well, if losing one makes me anything near Coach Holly, I can live with it. So,
wow.
I mean, that's what we talked about. I mean, he was just consoling me.
Wow. That's what a moment between two leaders.
And I knew he knew how he felt because the year before we beat him in 08, he had lost.
Right. Wow. Coach Prime, this is your question. As a position coach, you were the quiet coach. When you had to make the switch to head coach, how did you mentally and emotionally kind of prepare yourself for that to do it? And did the returning players that you had as a assistant coach respond well to that?
Okay, you can yell to get people's attention, but I found out that the quieter you talk, the more they lean in to listen. So I don't think you always have to yell. Now, as a new head coach, some of the folks I had coached under, I was trying to be a little too much like them, and I had to figure out, just be who you are.
Right.
And that took a little time.
I've had to learn that myself. You got to see me at my beginning. I was definitely, I felt like I had to emulate someone. And there's still there is a bit of every coach that has coached me in me. I think now that I'm 12 years in, I'm realizing it a little bit later than I should, but I think realizing it is the goal. And I'm not to say that there's still not a little bit of Coach Granton, a little bit of Scott Johnson, a little bit of Joe Hutchins, a little bit of Scott Carter, or Josh Purdue or Greg Lloyd. You pick stuff up from everybody, but you do have to, I guess, pick and choose which pieces you're going to use and make your own.
Right.
Make your own.
That's a great way to say that.
To kind of follow up, how did you kind of make that switch mentally from assistant coach to I'm the head guy now? Like what?
It wasn't so much, there's a classic song that says, everybody thinks I'm different, but I haven't changed, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
People start treating you different, and it doesn't take very long to see that. And that's harder to get used to than anything. Like when I retired and Coach Granton was named the head coach, I told him, I said, it seems like, the king is dead, long live the king. Kids that would normally walk up, if me and him were standing together, and ask me a question, I was no longer standing there.
Right.
They were walking up talking to him. And I was okay with that. I chose to retire.
Right.
But that's hard to get used to, but it's how people treat you different. And for me, I was wondering why a lot of them were treating me different. That was,
that was
suspicious.
A shock.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as far as the coaching aspect of it, I didn't really think that was as hard as maybe thinks it, or Coach Prime thinks it is.
Coach Prime. Yeah, Coach Prime. What was your own moment of being a teacher? Because we're not just coaches, a lot of us, we're also teachers.
I don't know if I ever really had one that was a negative one, to be quite honest. I had some knuckleheads along the way, but nothing that I thought was, that bad.
Gotcha. I
will tell you a quick story y'all will appreciate as teachers. So I had these 3 girls, the best buddies. Every time you saw one, you saw the other 2. I mean, they're best friends. And I had them for Honors Algebra 2. And at that time, we had first period and we had a break. And they would do announcements right before a break, if I remember right. Or maybe it was right after.
Yeah, that's how, when I was in school.
So we're in class or whatever, and these 3 girls I used to love to aggravate, and you know how I am.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so they are announcing that I had one teacher of the year. Well, I'd already fussed at them 2 or 3 times about them being silly that day. They announced that I'm teacher of the year, and them 3 girls just bust out laughing. I said, what the heck? I said, that's pretty insulting. You don't think I deserve teacher of the year?
You get an F.
Bethany Cruz pointed at my shoes, and I looked down, and I had on 2 brown shoes. They just wasn't the same ones. And I said, Bethany, I got another pair just like them at home.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my goodness.
So that would qualify a little bit.
That's great.
Coach Prime was
Coach
talking about me not being real loud. And you mentioned the fog game. Do you remember halftime of that game?
Yes, I do.
Did I yell and show myself?
No.
That was me.
Yeah.
I don't mean that ugly. Other coaches may have went in and raised the sand. Right. And I just told y'all, what are y'all scared of? You remember? What are y'all scared of?
What are you scared
can
of?
do this.
What are you scared
All you
of?
got to do is just do it.
Because we walked in that locker room going, oh no. And sitting down, looking at each other. And then he goes in and goes, what are you scared of? And click. Here we go.
It's like you were afraid you were going to lose.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And Rashawn ended up running for 225 or something that night. And after halftime was the most of it because we got in flex and said, Here you go, Rashawn.
I can remember us walking out after halftime and you saying, "What are we?" And the rest of us going a second half team.
I also remember that Will Central game. They had a really good running back, Dawson. I don't know if you know this.
Oh, my gosh, buddy.
That whole week, all week, I'd go by Rashawn and say, they say he's the best running back in this league.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they say. He's the best.
He's going to win the conference MVP, and you're not.
He's going to be Offensive Player of the Year. And the first time he tackled him, Rashawn tackled him, and in his face, he said, "I'm the best running back in this league." And I was over there.
Yes, he did.
I was going, "We won this one. We got this one."
Yep.
That's awesome.
We may have to cut that part out.
That's okay.
That's too good.
Yeah. Our last character ed of my junior year, I went back to my parents' house and grabbed my old character education notebook from my junior year. I also have my senior year, but I've really been kind of studying this one. Some of us old heads will remember, 2008 was a little tumultuous, right? Like a lot of crazy things happened. A lot of people lost things, stability, especially financial stability. This was the last character education that I got from you on that year. And there's a section in here that I read the other day that just pow right in my face of why coaches coach. You start off with, "I am truly worried about the example that is being set for your generation. We must learn to accept responsibility for our actions. Admitting you are wrong or that you made a mistake does not make you weak. In fact, I'd argue it makes you stronger. Am I perfect? Heck no. I make mistakes all the time. I'm lucky that my God is a gracious God whose love and mercy is beyond all understanding. I am also lucky to be surrounded by people who love me and are quick to overlook my faults. Responsibility is a big word and it involves many things, but mostly it involves honesty. When you become a parent, it is a huge responsibility. When you commit to a marriage, it involves a huge responsibility. When you commit to a team, it also involves a huge responsibility." Talk to me a little bit about how, this is one you obviously came up with. I know you use poems and things, and talk to me about how you found, and I know this is a coaching podcast, but how did you find the emotional vulnerability to write this and present it? Because I read it, and me and my own self, I thought, there's no way I would have went in front of 35 kids and said, "Let's dissect this," something I wrote. So how did you not only develop it, but find that emotional availability to kind of let your own thoughts out onto the page?
I never tried to hide who I am or what I'm all about, so it wasn't to me like I was letting you in on something you didn't already know.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It does. Talk to me about how you develop these lessons.
How many times did our speaker on Thursday come in and speak, and you all start looking at me
every time
that I said something to that speaker?
Every time.
So it was not me. It was the good Lord working.
And I did not believe that until I started coaching with you. I did not believe it. When I was playing for him and he, would have, I'm trying to think of one of the lessons that sticks out to me in my brain. But anyway, every week, every Wednesday night meal, they would say something, and it would, the theme of that week would have been integrity or honesty or whatever. And they'd get up and be like, "Today we're going to talk about integrity." And we look at Coach Johnson like, "Buddy, really?
Right.
Can we get one day off,
And not always, I didn't say
and we'd get that right there back from him. And I thought he was full of crap. And then I got hired, and we start going to Wednesday night meals, and I'm looking at him like, oh my God, it really is just luck of there's something weird going on here, right?
Most coaches kind of have their thing that I wouldn't say better at, but a little more comfortable coaching. So one guy might be better with O-line, that kind of thing. So how do you handle as a head coach, maybe stepping up and coaching quarterbacks, for example? How do you prepare and make sure you're ready for that role?
That's a good question, because I had always coached defense. And feel like I'm a really good defensive line coach and scheme-wise doing real well with defense. So when I became a head coach, I went to running backs and quarterbacks. So like I said earlier, I had spent time studying offenses. I wanted to know how they did a three-step drop. I wanted to know what the quarterback's eyes was looking at. So I was inadvertently, not intentionally learning how to coach a quarterback. That's what I was doing.
Right.
So that's how I prepared. Like when we started running midline here, I had spent 2 years on how to run midline and basically taught I was still doing defense, but taught the offense how to run midline because I loved it. I thought, to stop that, that's tough. So we need to be doing it.
Yeah.
Never stop learning.
Never stop.
No, I sent you some linebacker stuff a while back.
Yeah,
I still
Yeah.
get emails and read through things and watch videos and just interested.
Next question, we were talking about adjustments. I can remember growing up and hearing the older generation, my parents' age, well, that team just didn't make any halftime adjustments. That's why they lost. How do you manage making halftime adjustments versus sticking to a game plan and still keeping the kids confident in what the goal is?
Yeah. So he was talking about I would find somebody on defense or find a weakness in their scheme that I wanted to give them a formation to attack. Usually the first 4 or 5 plays would be different formations or different motions to see what they were going to do. I got one real huge compliment with my wife a while back. She ran into this kid that played at Forbush. And he probably he was before Andrew, but not a lot before Andrew. And he found out that she was my wife, and he said, we always thought we had a game with Starmount. And he said we could always get to halftime and be halfway decent game. And I thought, no, not really. But he said we knew at halftime it was over because we knew he was going to figure out what we were doing. And once you get that reputation, it starts playing into other. Me convincing you all that we were a second half team was partly because the adjustments would start working, and then you all believed, bought in that, hey, we'll fix whatever's wrong and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But you have to do it first. Yeah. You can't just say we're going to do it. There was
definitely a feeling of give it time.
Yeah.
Give it time. We're going to crack it. It's just a matter of which time are we going to crack it. That was definitely a feeling.
You mentioned that some of your discipline was handled one-on-one with you and the kid on the field, separate from everybody else. How do you differentiate between when a player needs one-on-one discipline versus the whole team needs to be included?
I understand. He probably remembers we were on a Thursday on the game field, and it wasn't exactly going to suit me. And on a Thursday, we lined up and ran over backs.
I do recall.
And that was to send the message. We were playing somebody we should have beat, and everybody was taking it too lightly.
Yes, we were.
So, you can get a feel for if it's all of them or if it's one that's the problem.
Right. I know a lot of times the situation I may need to discipline a kid for could have been avoided with a little accountability from his teammates.
Yeah, that's that leadership piece.
Yes. So a lot of times if it's something in that situation, the whole team may, do the same disciplinary action, and we'll talk about keeping each other accountable in class and things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know some coaches will make the one kid that messed up sit out and watch the other ones run. I've never been really big on that because I wanted that one that caused it to be the first one. You better be first because you're causing this.
Yeah.
Make sure you're getting that effort out of them.
That leads me back to another question that I did not cover earlier. Let's talk about captains and leadership on your team. You've mentioned just then that, you would prefer for the kids to kind of police themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I guess how do you as the head coach kind of push is the wrong word, maybe pressure certain kids to maybe take up a leadership role that they may not have taken by themselves?
I said that about coaches telling kids they need to be leaders. That's why we started doing the leadership stuff in the summer for the seniors, to try to talk about what does it look like to be a good leader, what do good leaders do, and then if you start developing those leaders, you can have them handle things for you. I know we've talked about that before, about me going by a certain kid and saying, look, so-and-so's messing up, you need to talk to him.
Yeah.
But they have to know what you mean by that, too. If they go over and threaten them, that's not building a team.
Right.
They have to understand that. So how do you put them in them positions? Well, when you're doing weightlifting things, you remember we used to divide up in teams in the weight room and have competitions. So you pick people to be the captains. Now, some people don't like that in this day and age where there's going to be somebody that's last. But that kid that's last is last for a reason. If it's not because he's a skinny freshman in a room full of seniors, I mean, that's not fair. But if it's because he hadn't been busting his tail or he's been skipping weightlifting, you're last for a reason. They didn't want you because you've not done what you're supposed to. He needs to know that.
Right. Sounds like responsible peer pressure.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it ain't fun to be called out like that, but sometimes you need to be shown.
Yeah, you need to be shown. Sometimes instead of saying it, maybe it can be communicated to you by showing you.
And I always try to make those games that where everybody can contribute. It's not just about size or just strength. Everybody had a chance to, you may be smaller, but maybe you can do more pull-ups than the big guy that's squatting 500, stuff like that, Put them in situations.
Yeah.
Gentle persuasion.
Peer pressure can be used for a positive
if you allow it to.
If you manipulate it.
I guess all 2.5 years, I guess, that I was privy to Character Ed. You started the year every year with a certain poem.
Yep.
That poem was The Cold Within. It's by James Patrick, I think, Kenny?
Maybe.
James Patrick Kenny. Talk to me about, or maybe explain your reasoning and logic behind choosing that poem to be the first.
Yeah. Tim Pruitt, who coached here with us, he was here in 98 and stuff. And he was good friends. I was in his wedding and stuff. He mentioned that poem to me in passing sometime, told me what it was about. He may have used it when he was I don't remember if he was head coach at West first or Cherryville first. Anyway, but he mentioned the poem and I read it. And I thought, what could be better for a high school team of different people who have different talents, having to choose to use those talents for the betterment of the team. In this example, it's easily relatable to people. Get it?
Is there a week or a game coming up, or maybe a season in particular that gave you pause?
When I say hard to find, you can usually tell the dynamic of what's going on in the team, or maybe what's coming up. What I'm saying, something that is appropriate for that. Like the blessing tree, that we talked about.
Yes.
Why did I do that one? Well, we had some people that was thinking a little too highly of themselves, and some people that was taking themselves too serious. And that gave you a middle ground to talk about that. I mean, it just has to fit the situation. Where it originally started with, and I'll have to give Tim some credit, I think he talked about them doing something similar when he was at Cumberland, but it was there, or maybe he had wanted to do something at West. I don't remember, but I remember searching for things. My first impetus was the leadership stuff, and then I thought, well, you're doing that with seniors. You're missing 3 years of time that you could help these kids be better people. And I started tinkering with it with that fourth period weightlifting.
Yeah,
because we had some kids in there that were struggling to find their way.
Yes.
And I thought, how can I help these kids to figure it out?
Was there ever a Character Ed lesson that did with us, but maybe you kind of did it more for yourself?
That last one, probably.
The last one, the responsibility one? Yeah.
I mean, that was me, because I knew I wasn't going to have you very much longer. I mean, as a group. Because every group is different. You might have some of the same people, but the dynamic is different. I haven't said much about this to people, but Kenny and Dawn at Purdue, I know they prayed for me. Probably still do. I mean, know they did. And when we walked off the field at Newton, you all were ahead of me, and I'm coming, and Kenny and Dawn are there, and I just about collapsed in Dawn's arms. Just the emotional, I don't have anything left.
Right.
And that's where some of that was coming from. Yeah, because there's nobody could have said should have won that game, or Anyways.
There had been no doubt. Well, number one, Coach, I cannot thank you enough for coming on, and number one, being our first guest.
I really appreciate it.
Blessing. It's been a blessing to have you as a coach, to know you in my life, call you a friend.
Absolutely.
It was a huge blessing for you to pronounce me as a married man to my wife. It was a fantastic moment. Little lore there for the podcast people. Thank you so much for not only being on this show, but for being who you are. You have no idea, like some of the other coaches we had talked about, what an impact you have had throughout your life on other people. And I think my great-grandmother used to say, the purpose of life is service to others. I think me growing up as a young man and losing her, and then losing her about the time I met you, was something that maybe the universe, God's greater plan, kind of put in my path for a very specific reason. And thank you.
Thank you
for that.
What he said, and they wrapped it all up in a pretty bow. I will say what I sat here noticing was that when you answered questions, and I think about how other coaches might try to find a response to those questions, or they would need a step-by-step guide on how to be a leader or how to coach young men and women. It just comes easy to you. It's just who you are as a person.
Yes.
And that speaks so profound of who you are.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning into our first ever long-form interview episode. Thank you to all the guys and people who have liked our stuff, who have shared our stuff. You know, I've had some people contact me. I'm sure Coach Smith has had people contact him. Some of the support we've gotten is awesome. You know, hoping to maybe break 1,000 views here pretty soon. That'll be exciting, right? That's all for our episode. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you can, and follow us on our social medias. We got the Instagram up.
Yep.
We've got the YouTube up. Spotify working yet?
Yes. You can find us on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Until next time, we hope you have a great time. Have a great evening.